This episode includes emotional and sensitive content regarding the experiences of battling cancer, confronting trauma, and navigating life after death. Additionally, it delves into the process of healing and the profound impact of loss. If you or someone you know is struggling or in crisis, help is available. Call or text 988 or chat 988lifeline.org. Welcome to It's Your Story to Tell. I'm so happy to be here with you today. I have a really special guest, Robin, here with me today, and we were connected through our advocacy work. Both of us have a passion for advocacy and specifically around melanoma. I know you know my dad has melanoma, and we're going to hear a little bit more about Robin's story and how he lost his wife to melanoma and how that has led him to become one of the most amazing patient advocates in the nation when it comes to melanoma. So thank you for being here with me today. And I know that our listeners are going to gain so much from your journey and sharing with us how you navigated grief, not only for yourself, but for your family, your daughter particularly. And so I just appreciate you being willing to be here and share with us today.
Thank you for the opportunity to share the story. I hope to inspire and help anyone else, and you know, whatever they hear from me, maybe it can help them deal with whatever they go through themselves.
Grief comes in many forms, and so the things that you have to share are going to be pertinent to navigating whatever form they're experiencing. And so thank you. And I would love if you would let's just jump right in and tell us a little bit about where you have been over the past, was in 2008?
2004.
Okay.
When my wife was diagnosed.
Okay.
And at that time, our daughter was 8 and my son was 18. One thing we did was be honest with them. We didn't hide what was going on. And at the time, we were pretty positive because my wife went through a small surgical procedure to remove the melanoma, and then what's called a nodal biopsy, where they drop a dye and they check the nodes that would have fed into and see if there's any melanoma in those, and it looked all clear. So we felt, we had gotten it all. That's how the doctors termed it. We got it all. She did a year of immune therapy with interferon just to kind of ensure that there weren't any stray melanoma cells floating around that were going to take place. But about 6 months after she completed that, she felt a lump under her arm, and it was a node that was infected with the melanoma. Subsequent scans showed it in the liver. Through that, we started a treatment called IL-2, it's very intense. It's a treatment where you have to be in the hospital for a week during the treatment. You get a neck catheter, which is they go in through, and then they have to have like 8 IVs. So they hook all that up. You're there for a week. And then that was in Portland. We lived in Lafayette, so we drive in. She'd check in. I'd go each evening. Sometimes my daughter would as well, and she'd come home on Friday. And then subsequent scans just didn't respond. So, and they told us right at the beginning, we knew that the survival rate, the response rate was only 3%, but it was the only thing we had. And with, now a 10-year-old child at home, we had to do everything possible we could. So trying not to lose her mother.
Yeah. Wow. That's, we've talked a little bit, and we were just talking before this podcast of how important advocacy and research is. And, when my dad was diagnosed 2 years ago with melanoma, similarly, he had melanoma in situ. He had melanoma on his neck that actually, I think it was his shoulder, that qualified him for sentinel lymph node biopsy. And nodes were negative. And then years later, during COVID, he started to present with cough, and they treated it for bronchitis, and then that didn't go away. And I remember talking to him on the phone one night, being a nurse and my background's in cardiology. He sounded so short of breath, almost like he was in heart failure. And I'm like, Dad, this is not normal. You need to go in. It was a Friday. Of course, he would not go in until Monday, which his doctor sent him directly to the ER, and they found that it had spread at that point to his lungs. And then he was admitted to the hospital and had it found in his liver and in his bones. And we were we were told we're going to try this immune therapy,
Right.
but there's a potential it won't work. And he has been an amazing responder to immune therapy, has had total regression. And then he was off for just a little under a year when he had a scan and they found it in his pancreas. And he's back on immune therapy and things are stable. So, the work that you are doing, and I know you work with AIM and War on Melanoma, but specifically AIM really looking at the research side and finding drugs and new things that, because of that work, my dad is still with us, because if we didn't have that today.
Yeah, there's two. Right now, we have, over the last 10 years, they developed an arsenal of immunotherapy drugs. And so they have quite a few drugs, but the response rate is not what they'd like to see, maybe a 30 to 50% response rate. And then on top of that, even when you do respond, it has a tendency that melanoma will adapt and it will fall away within, anywhere from three months to a year. The drug will stop working. So now a lot of research is going into looking at, again, how the immune system works. I just signed up with some doctors looking at a grant and looked at their abstract and wrote a letter of support for their grant project. So they're looking at that. They're also looking at adjuvant versus neoadjuvant treatments, whether to do drug, then surgery, then drug, surgery, then drug, which drug first, how to combine the drugs. There's all these different little movable factors to try and make the treatments just more effective. And it's interesting, you talk about your father and his wanting to ignore his symptoms. We call that toxic masculinity. It's kind of standard. Well, what happened when my wife passed away is I realized my daughter now just had me. So toxic masculinity went out the window. It was like, man, if I have any symptom, I'm going to the doctor because she can't lose her father. What came about a couple of years later then was I had a spot on my chest, which I normally would have ignored. It really wasn't much, but it just wasn't healing like I thought it should. I knew enough about melanoma. I knew it wasn't melanoma, but I did think it could have been one of the other skin cancers. So I went in and had it checked. It was nothing. But during the complete skin check, the spot on my back I didn't know about, that was precancerous melanoma. Caught it in stage 1A, just as early as you can catch it. And so it was in situ. He removed that. He says, nice thing on the back, you can take a wide margin. There's a lot of skin. So he could, took off a little extra just to be safe, so there weren't any stray cells out. And then, first, every 3 months going in, then every 6 months, then once a year. And I still see him once a year, and my daughter goes once a year to the same dermatologist. The thing about melanoma and a melanoma on the skin, picture it like a soda. You know how you pour a glass of fresh soda and you feel it effervesce? Well, that's what melanomas will do. You'll have the cell, but you'll have all these little tendrils that are pretty much invisible reaching out. And they've done a lot of research as what's the minimum amount of margin to take and still have an effect. So, they did a lot of research on, well, once we went this far, there was no additional help. So they know how far to go without going too far.
Right.
Especially when you start doing something on the face or something, you have to be a lot more aware.
Right. Well, I think that you bring up another really good point in the fact that I've worked in dermatology and oncology. I work closely with OHSU and have really helped fundraise for their war on melanoma and finding things early. Really early detection in any disease state, in my opinion, is the best chance that you're going to have, whether it's your blood pressure, your diabetes, or cancer. The sooner you can take action on it, the more likely, and screening for it. But oftentimes people think they go into a doctor for a spot, and that's not the spot that is concerning, but they will find something. So, it's so important that people are getting their skin checked. So I hope you're hearing this. If you have not had a skin check, you should, because even in Oregon, people think, well, the sun's never out. We have one of the highest rates of melanoma because of the effect of not having the skin exposed to a lot of sun. And then we all know how much we love when the sun comes out and we get out there and we aren't as conscious as maybe someone living in Florida who's constantly in the sun and they know that if they don't put their sunscreen on, they're going to get burnt.
Yeah. The tools for monitoring and early detection they've gotten much more less invasive. So when you go in and you do a full skin exam, they see a spot that's suspicious. The old adage was, when in doubt, cut it out. And so now they're getting away from that. Now if they see a spot that's suspicious, they have a few options. They can take a photo and then take a photo again in a few months, and they'll actually have AI look to see if it's changed rather than rely on your naked eye. They have patches they can stick on there that will remove a few cells that they can look at, all without any kind of surgical removal and scarring. They really try to make it as the least invasive they need to be. We talk about Aim at Melanoma, and their fundraising right now is for something called the International Melanoma Primary Tissue Bank. One of those branches of the bank is here, being housed at OHSU. Not technically an OHSU project. It's an international project that everyone has available to. And what they find is that the importance of having primary tissues, the first one that's removed, not any subsequent ones, gives them a lot more ability to research how a melanoma originates and gives them
what does it do? How did it respond and where did it go? And
yes, exactly. And the data is accessible can be requested by any doctor internationally. So that's really going to be a big boost to research and preventing. Early detection. When we talk about melanoma, I came up with the saying, it's fear feeds prevention, but hope feeds diagnosis and treatment. You can use fear to get people to use sunscreen, to wear hats, to stay in the shade, avoid certain hours a day. But if you want someone to go in and get diagnosed or checked, you have to give them a message of hope. Otherwise, there's
true, right? Because sometimes we like to just bury our head in the sand if we think, well, if I get this outcome, and I've Googled on the internet and I get all the fear, you're just kind of can get paralyzed, and so that's such a good point. What an awesome quote. So hopefully people are hearing, that's what we're here to say, is there is so much hope. There's so much research going on, and you have to advocate for yourself too, and make sure that you are getting checked. The last time we were actually together was at an OHSU event where some of our doctors here locally were recognized because they had found the world's smallest melanoma, and they were using all of those tools you were talking about, including something really special that Oregon has, which is confocal microscopy, where they are able to basically do a biopsy virtually, where it's a laser that they can look at it and see the cells very much like if they were to cut it out and look at it under a microscope. It's just in a horizontal plane versus vertical. And they're having such great success with finding these things early. And we know then you do get to cut it out, take those appropriate margins, monitor it, and hopefully continue to have better outcomes so that you don't have to experience the journey that you and your daughter had to endure. So.
But like Dr. Leachman likes to say, it's the cancer you can see. There's a small percentage that will be non-locational, but if you know what you're looking for, or even if you just see something suspicious, you can have it at least ruled out and have it looked at. And like I say, you're not necessarily going to have surgery to have that done. And so it's a lot less invasive than it ever used to be. I've watched, my wife actually in her last few months was on a clinical study for the very first immunotherapy drug that came in, ipilimumab. And so she was taking that. She did not respond. It was a double-blind study where there was a placebo, but when you've taken the drug because there's certain side effects.
Right.
The side effects weren't too bad. Mostly it was dry skin and peeling. And so we knew she was having the drug, but, scans showed that it just wasn't having an effect. So we eventually had to have hospice come in. I was lucky that my wife, two of her sisters were RNs, so they were there to help through that time.
That is so amazing when you have that support that can be there more frequently, because we just went through that with my husband's dad in hospice. He passed away just before turning 96, so a really long life. But being a nurse, I was able to be there, and because hospice only comes in, so often. So I'm glad you guys had that.
It makes the passing so much easier, so much less a mystery. I will say the hardest day of my life was not the day my wife passed away. It was the day before, when hospice hadn't showed up yet, but we knew they were coming, and my daughter came home, and I had to we sat on the couch together, and I had to tell her that doctors have told us we've done all we can and that she will be passing away soon. So that
how old was she at that?
She was 12.
12.
Yeah.
That is not a conversation that I would ever know even how to have with my child, How did you, I've been so impressed by the things that you've shared with me. How did you know, how to have that conversation with her, and what was it from whether the way you were brought up, or, that gave you just the ability to be there and compassionate?
Yeah, I'd say, it's kind of funny with my parents. There wasn't a lot said, families of the, born in the 20s. There wasn't a lot of being demonstrative, but my father was a very good role model. And the thing was, didn't have a working class, didn't have a lot of money. So if something broke, you either fixed it, and if you didn't know how, you learned how to fix it. So you just went ahead and just, you did it. You took care of things. If there's a problem, you just faced it and did what you had to do. And I think that's been my motto the whole time, is that when you see, just being proactive. And that's what happened with the loss. I immediately was proactive about grief and how it would affect my daughter. So research, reading, as I told you, I read Grief Recovery Handbook and Motherless Daughters, Legacy of Loss, so I could specifically understand my daughter, what she was going through, and what would help, what wouldn't help, what things that happened I should worry about, and that's just the natural part, just let it ride. A lot of times that's how it is. It's like, you just have to know what not to worry about and just let it work its way through. One of the things I learned too is I had to address my own grief before my daughter would be able to. Children will pick up on things that don't ever lie to your children. I mean, if you're sick, they'll imagine something much worse than what is reality. But what I read was that until the child realizes you're okay with your grief, they won't be able to process their own. So I got myself into therapy, and my daughter and I were open to each other about how we felt. I cried in front of her. It's you don't want to hide it. You want to let them know it's okay to grieve.
Right. Yeah, I think there's so many nuggets in what you just shared. The first one being, and it relates back to what you were saying about hope and kind of fear, right? Mm-hmm. And when you are moving forward in I talk a lot about growth mindset, but recognizing that we can learn from our challenges, that if we don't put our head in the sand, that we can get through it. And on my own journey of emotional healing, I had spent so many years thinking, if I can just pretend like it's not there, maybe it'll go away. Well, that does not work, and so then it just builds and gets bigger and bigger until something brings you to a breaking point where you have to confront it. So my advice to people is, when you are going through something hard, don't run, don't hide. Look for resources, like you said, and get informed, and then get a community, like people who you can rely on too to help you, like you did, whether it's a counselor or a coach or a friend. Having somebody that you can work through things with is, I think, so important, so that it's that old adage, like, put your oxygen mask on before helping someone else. Or in life, I was a lifeguard growing up. It's like, you have to have your float, your safety, or they are going to start struggling. They're going to grab onto you, and if you don't have something to hold you up, then you're going down too. So I think those are so valuable. And then the piece about our kids are so aware, and we think, oh, we can hide this. No, I thought I was hiding things in my journey, and now as they're older and we're talking about it, they remember things I don't even remember. And so being honest and not trying to hide things and helping them navigate that is such a gift, because, like you said with your dad, we're either passing down good coping mechanisms or we're passing down maladaptive ones, and then they're going to struggle.
That was a huge advantage for us, because through the process we were open and honest. So when she did pass away, she was used to being able to come to me to say things. And it was later, we had conversations, but she asked me, we knew what we didn't like hearing. We didn't like hearing, oh, you'll be okay, I'm sorry for you, they're in a better place. It's, all the platitudes. And my daughter asked me, what do I say to someone, because she had a classmate that lost her father in a car accident. And what's the best thing to say to her? And says, well, you don't say that, you don't tell them how, let's see, what is it? It says, I don't know how you feel, but I know how I felt when I lost my other sibling, parent. And what that opens up is, it opens up a conversation, and they'll either ask you how you felt, or they'll start explaining how they are feeling now. So you don't want to tell them how they should be feeling. You allow them to tell them how they feel themselves.
So good. One of the things when I am coaching people or teaching people how to investigate their own feelings is the power of curiosity, and by asking questions, because then we're not assigning our perspective, our motive. It's not about us, but when you ask it in the way that you're creating this, I'm here. I went through something. It's not the same, but it just allows them to feel safe, because I think you're right when we say words like, she's in a better place, that does not allow for any conversation. It does not allow for connection. Mm-hmm. But I also understand we're not taught how to have these conversations, these hard and awkward conversations, and helping our kids find those words and then finding them even ourselves is something I think that's so important to empowering our community.
One of the hard things about these conversations, one is we know they're going to hurt. We know they're going to be painful. And actually for the person who's already gone through something, doing that, you're going to relive that again. One of the hardest things that happens is when you haven't seen someone in a few years and they don't know that the person has passed, and they ask, oh, how is so-and-so doing? How are they doing now? Oh, well, they passed away. Then you got to explain it all to them again, and it's hard to watch. There was a show for a while called Go On with Matthew Perry, and there was a few things it did right. One of them was he had this gardener who came to the house, and his wife always dealt with the gardener. And and his wife had passed away, so it was about his working this out. But the gardener would show up, oh, this is for Mrs., your wife. Says, oh, thank you. And he wouldn't tell him. I mean, it was like a year, and he hadn't told him that his wife had passed away yet, just because he didn't want to make him feel bad. And it's very true. And that happened to me. I had a coworker that had been out sick for 6 months. And when he came back, he said, oh, I said, I know your wife was going through cancer treatment. How's she doing? Well, she passed away. And so I know what that feels like. You just avoid the subject because not only you're going to have to witness someone get hurt by it. Right. Even if you've dealt with it and are okay with it and have accepted it, still means you got to hurt someone else to do the talk.
Right. Yeah, hard conversations are definitely another thing we avoid often, but when we embrace them, we actually connect on a totally different level with the person that we're talking to, And so by avoiding it, we actually are avoiding something positive at the same time, And so learning how to embrace that and to navigate it, is then brings freedom in those conversations, And so thank you for kind of sharing that perspective, because it is hard to know exactly how to acknowledge.
You have to mourn what you've lost, but appreciate what you had. And one of the things that happened was, here's how you tell you're getting better with your grief. To start with, every memory is like a dagger. It's going to bring a tear. It hurts to think of every memory you had. But one by one, those memories instead will change and bring a smile instead. That's how that's how I realized, oh, I'm getting better, because we could talk about this, or my daughter and I could laugh at, hey, remember how mom used to do this, or remember how, oh, mom would have hated this, or hey, I'm doing this now. What would she think of me doing this? And my daughter had the conversation with me. She brought up to me, she says, how different a person would I be had mom not passed away and I hadn't raised her, because my wife and I had really different interests. I mean, I brought her into science fiction. I think the Shakespeare and the musical and the plays, I think something she would have done anyway, but, I fostered that, regularly went to Ashland, went to Broadway plays on a regular basis. Yeah, I love
the
Ashland.
Shakespeare Festival. That's super fun to see.
Yeah. But she was the one who brought up that conversation. So I thought that was, she was mature. She matured quickly, of course, for
It's such powerful introspection that she was even doing there in her own life, because the things that we go through do shape us.
Oh.
And how we will never know, you can speculate how you might turn out, but I'm reading a book right now called The Obstacle is the Way. And it's all about how our perception and our attitude and how we face it, because obstacles are going to happen. We live in this world.
Yeah.
And so how do you choose to show up when you're going through that, and you have definitely equipped her to be able to face the obstacles. When we were talking, you had shared one of the things that I thought was also really insightful when you were talking about you didn't push her and until she was ready and for counseling and those kind of things. How did you know when was the right time, or maybe it wasn't the right time, but it worked out anyways, but how did that approach happen for you?
Strangely simple. You ask them, you simply, well, do you want to see a counselor? And at first, no, I don't want to talk about it. No. And then, well, maybe. Yeah, okay. And then we went on and researched together. There's Psychology Today has a great website, and we were able to look through, review, and read about different counselors, ones who specialize in teen grief, who was nearby and was a woman, and we read their backgrounds, and so we chose one that way. It's almost like online dating. But she was part of that process. Right. There were days when she just was down, couldn't go to school. I would take her and say, hey, well, we'll just go to the dog park and watch the dogs play. You can't feel bad if you're watching dogs play.
You're right.
It always lifts you up. So it was a dog park, McMinnville. We didn't have a dog at the time, but we'd just go and we'd watch, and it would always be a little better.
Wow. I'm blown away. We hadn't shared that, but you're right. Finding things that can bring you joy.
Exactly.
When you're not feeling it, putting yourself in a place where it's hard to not put a smile, even if it's just for a minute, to give yourself a little reprieve from that darkness. Thanks for that tip. That's an awesome one. Go to the dog park and just watch them play. You're right. That is such a fun way to, for me, it was getting in nature, just being next to water and the peacefulness of the birds. And, for me, it was able to kind of calm my mind and allow me to just look at something pretty and take my mind off of whatever it was. So I think it's important. That's not running from it,
no,
right?
It's taking a break.
Yes. And that's so important that you listen to your mind and your body, because I know when I was going through my journey, there were times I was burning myself out on personal development, burning myself out on learning and growing. And it was like, whoa, take a breather.
When you dwell so hard on a problem, you can't see the forest for the trees. You have to take that step back. It's like when in school, I was working on a math problem and I just struggling. And then I go and I'm taking a shower and just not thinking. All of a sudden the answer comes. It just flows out. So we talked about my daughter, talking about what she would have been like had this not happened. And I kind of, that applies to me too, because, I became very proactive. I was not someone that would go out and speak to people or confront people. I went to work, I came home, I was a homebody. I really wasn't that open with people. Like I said, I talked a little about, I garnered legislation. I ran into a situation with my employer. Well, the employer was fine. They told me I could take off all the time I wanted. I had 12 weeks of sick leave, but I couldn't use that because it wasn't FMLA. So
you work all that time, not take vacation, and then when you really need it.
Yeah, and what had happened during her treatment, I was always online, always on the computer watching things medically, and she passed away in 2008. That was the year the law was passed to allow care of a family member for under FMLA. So that made me realize, well, that can be changed. So I called a legislator and say, care of a family member just got added. Can we change to death of a family member as well? And they thought, that's a great idea. So the process for creating a law was you make an appointment, you go in, visit with the legislator. They write out 2 sentences. It's called an LC, legislative concept. And that's sent to the basement to the legal people, and they grab the bill, see how it fits in, write out all the legal stuff, and then comes back, and then you have a bill for hearings. And, you attend the hearings, you meet with the legislators that will put, it's in committee, so you're going to those hearings for that specific committee to support that bill. And you find people who also support it. I had, the religious organization, the hospice nurses, and interesting enough, the woman who's labor commissioner now, she was a law student and intern at the time. She had just lost her father, and so she came and spoke for it. So, and it's interesting, you make this group of friends and you see them move on, from that, and that happened to me. I finished this legislation and I realized I helped someone. And I was putting out flyers for melanoma awareness at the beginning of May around locally. I didn't know anything about melanoma yet. And then I hear about them and they're having a walk in Portland. And then I joined OHSU as a volunteer, helping with the walk, met some people, ended up on a board working on a grant. And that's how I started going to Washington, D.C. And it just steamrolled. Everything the more I learned, the more I knew, the more I felt responsible for getting the message out. And that's so now I say I'm burdened with glorious purpose. And it's important to have purpose. I don't know if you've ever read the movie A Man Called Ove, the book, and Tom Hanks just came out with an American version of the movie. Okay. And it was all about, him after loss of his wife finding his purpose. And it's important to have purpose. It really helps. It helps you deal with the loss. It's definitely, this is part of my healing, is the advocacy work I do. And it's so rewarding when you meet someone that, hey, thanks for telling me. I went and found this spot and they removed it and it was in time, or, it's fairly early, but I'm in treatment and I'm looking at NED, no evidence of disease. And so when you see that, it's really rewarding, and it's a great thing to feel. And my dad, another thing he taught me was a good job is its own reward. I love to I'm a baker. I love to bake. So when I bake a really nice loaf of sourdough bread by scratch, it comes out, that's enough. Just seeing it is enough reward for me. So I've never been super comfortable with praise or recognition. So, but I realized more and more now the importance of that is that other people see it and are inspired to do the same, because the praise and recognition isn't necessarily about you. It's nice to be appreciated, but it's also important that other people see that something's been done and continues to be done.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more about purpose too. In all of the coaching and all of the work I do, I feel like you have to start with purpose, and because going through the hard days and the work of doing the healing and grieving is very hard. So you have to have something that anchors you into your why of what makes it worth going through this versus just not going through it. And so I'm really big on that. And this platform and this podcast is all about inspiring people to find purpose in their pain, and then when we find our purpose in our pain and we get to help other people, like we were talking about how when we found out that my husband, we had done bone marrow drive, and I
Right.
was like out there telling everybody in the community about Be the Match and asking them to do the swab to see if they could be a match. And then just a couple months ago, we find that one of the people who did it, then their wife saw the mailing coming, and then she joined. And then within a month of her joining, she matched with a little girl in Mexico. And we just, it becomes more inspiring. It's not about the fact that like we were doing something so great. We were kind of doing it because it was helping us, right? In the start, it was, my husband needed a bone marrow transplant. And then now we continue to advocate for that. Or when, my dad went through what he went through, and then I had the opportunity to work for a company in the space of melanoma, I was so excited and passionate about it because I knew that it could make a difference in someone else's lives, and they might not be facing what we were facing if we caught it early.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you have gotten quite a lot of recognition. I asked you to bring some things along with you, but tell me about this little globe, this glass. So for people who aren't from Oregon, glass blowing is kind of a unique thing to Oregon. We see it a lot on the coast.
It's a signature.
Yeah.
And the white and blue, that's significant as far as the colors of OHSU. And this is normally presented to guest speakers. This is the standard gift for guest speakers when they show up for a symposium. And it was one of our last symposiums before COVID, and it was there at OHSU in the Robertson building, and a pretty full audience. And I was kind of in the back because just listening, and I always like listening to this. I learned so much, and I'm called down to the stage, which I didn't know anything about, and she gave me this for my work as an advocate over the years, and it was, she praised me pretty highly, but I said, I really just think of myself. She calls herself a general in the war on melanoma, yes. And I said, I look at myself just a foot soldier. Mm-hmm. I take orders and go out and get it done, which is the role I like to do. Give me a purpose, a job to do. I will move heaven and earth to make sure that it's done one way or another. And that's the way
everybody has a role in this, in this life. And for some, like Dr. Leachman, she's a visionary. She is out there, definitely a general in this fight.
She's an inspiration. I'll tell you, anytime I'm getting kind of like burnt out or like, I just don't know. It's so much, I'll sit down, I'll bring her up on YouTube. She's got a few YouTube videos, and just hearing her talk makes me want to go out and just do all that much more.
Absolutely. I remember my first call that I had with Dr. Leachman about this, and just how inspired she made me to get busy and help and support. And I did everything I could. Got a really significant grant for them, participated in the golf tournament, worked with other doctors, and it was just, she's so inspiring. You can't help but want to get involved, especially when you've had a family member, and you see how hard she's willing to fight this. And so, Dr. Leachman, if you're listening, we love you and appreciate all that you're doing for people in this position. So you also mentioned the month of May. We just came out of Skin Cancer Awareness Month, and there's lots of events that go on around the nation, one being a walk.
Yes.
So you guys just did a walk here.
Yes, we just did the Amidst Melanoma walk. We held it at Oaks Park. I got a nice group photo that AIM sent me with their customized frame, which that's an appreciation I really like, because it's something I can display, remind myself of, and people will notice when they come in and can ask about it. What's nice is my daughter and her husband came, so they're beside me at this walk. So I love the group photo. These walks we do every year. We do them in May because May's Melanoma Awareness Month. As it happens, my wife passed on May 3rd. So it's always, some connection to it, which sometimes falls on the Monday in May, which is Melanoma Monday, it's called, because the unofficial start of summer. So every year we're all right. We finished this walk, and we're already looking at planning next year's walk. We've had actually some phone meetings, and we'll be having them. I'll still be having 2 or 3 more meetings in the next couple of weeks about preparing for next year's walk. It takes quite a bit to get one of these walks together and make them successful. And the success comes from, we get sponsorships, but the important part is getting participants and getting the word out. We have a tendency to end up in an echo chamber. Everyone at the walk is someone that's been going to the walk or is familiar, and we're trying to find locations that there's already people at. We're thinking possibly if we can swing it a golf course, something like Glendoveer or something, which has a really large parking area, it has a perfect walk path that goes around the outside of the golf. So we're looking at that this year.
People who play golf, it's important for them to be checking their skin because
Exactly,
they're often in the sun. I love that, and I think another important aspect for people to think about is when we're trying to create community, these types of events are a really good opportunity to connect with other people. So whether it's the, lymphoma leukemia, because that's what you are experiencing, these are a great opportunity for people to go out, support something, but also to meet other people that have had potentially similar journeys, family members, and so that they can find support. I know sometimes it's hard to think about when you're going through grief, like going and talking to other people and getting connected can feel pretty overwhelming and like a really big task.
It's interesting, because what also happens with that is if you meet someone who's been through it and they let you know, there's there's this unspoken connection. There's this, you're in that same family. The same thing with, when you're at these events, there's a networking, you're not alone anymore. I remember that feeling. I actually, one of the key things I did was I did push my daughter to go to, I don't know if you've ever heard of Camp Erin.
I haven't.
Camp Erin, it's ERIN, is a grief camp for children who have lost a sibling or parent. It's free. It's one weekend. I learned about it, and before you go, you meet with the other parents. There's a couple of meetings beforehand to go over the logistics of the whole thing. And when I walked in, I knew that everyone there all the parents had lost a spouse. And I'll tell you, it was a one time I suddenly didn't feel alone. It was a really unique feeling. My daughter's a big fan of Grey's Anatomy, and she brings back this clip. Watch this clip, and it's one of the doctors, one of the younger doctors, had just lost its father, and the other doctor, she brings him out. They're sitting on a bench together, and she says, "I want to welcome you to the club. It's an exclusive club. It's you lost your father club." It's not one anyone wants to be in. It's not by default, but now you're part of this club, and that's very true. When you've lost a spouse, you're just part of it. It's just going to happen. It's really just this unspoken feeling that's there because they know.
Right. Yeah. Finding people who have walked that journey is really helpful because there is so much knowing without even words because you've walked a very similar path. And I think it's important to find, people who are further down the path that can mentor you, that have experience like the things you're sharing now. And then wherever you're at, there is somebody who just lost something or is just starting the journey that you are a few steps ahead. So, sometimes I feel like, what am I doing doing this podcast or the work that I'm doing because, life's still hard. And I used to think, I'll wait to share my story when things are perfect. Still no perfect, and it's never going to happen. So by just being willing to be vulnerable with where you're at, you have a story, you have an opportunity, and there's always someone that's going to be behind you and ahead of you. And if you can just remember that you are important right where you're at, and you can make a difference right where you're at, and like not waiting to make a difference, because as you shared your story, like one step led to the next, led to the next, led to the next. So it's all about like small steps and just stepping out. You don't know what it'll lead to.
Well, it's amazing. The what I appreciate is the randomness of connections you make that just with conversations that sometimes can twist and say, oh, this happened. At the symposium that this was at before it started, I was in back and I was talking to this gentleman, and he was saying, "Oh, what brings you here?" He says, "Oh, my wife had melanoma. My daughter was 12 when she passed away." Oh, says, "Well, Dr. So-and-so, who's the head of oncology down there at OHSU, dermatology, she lost her mother to melanoma when she was 12. And so, so it's just these... It's just you have, and then us meeting in general, it was just because we happen to be at the same event, happen to be interested in the same cause.
Well, and that I'm a big believer in the power of vulnerability, and when we met, or when you met that other person, if you're not open to sharing your journey, sharing your life with people, then you miss out on those connections, because people don't know how to connect either with you or you to somebody else if you don't share.
Yeah. And part of that is, when you're sharing, you're presenting that you've dealt with it. You're okay with it. It's a part of your life. It's not good, but, you accept it. And if you can show you can accept that, someone else who's made that loss knows, okay, it's okay to accept the loss. It's okay to be happy again.
Such a good point.
It's I'm not entitled to be happy. I'm not entitled to smile. You'll feel that way for the first, I shouldn't feel happy because I'm still feeling the loss of someone else, but then you can't help but laugh at a good cartoon or joke or something. You allow yourself to be happy. It's hard. Then you'll feel guilt. One of the things we dealt with too was survivor's guilt, because, part of that, her death was a relief for us, because we had to see her in so much pain and so much struggle. And then also, we weren't sleeping much because there was always something going on, something we had to do. So you feel guilty because you're relieved because you don't have to go through that yourself anymore. And that's something you have to deal with as well, and learn to accept that that's what it is.
I think, actually I posted just the other day about a kind of a similar topic, about being able to experience two things at the same time. For me, I had a really hard time with that concept, because I was very black and white. Like, you're either this or you're that. There's not a gray in between. And so I learned this word called flawsome. Like, you can be flawed and awesome all at the same time. So it's like you can have grief and you can experience joy in life. And that is okay, but I understand that that's a journey in and of itself, of coming to that place of acceptance that you're not dishonoring that person. That person wants you to be happy, they would be sad to see you just never being able to find joy again.
And it's funny, I associate it with food in that, it's like having something sweet and spicy, or sweet and salty, both at the same time. They're oppose each other, but somehow one makes the other better. My daughter and I are big Doctor Who fans, and one of the things there was an episode about the death of Van Gogh, which is one of my daughter's favorite shows. But he does this talk about understanding that life is a pile of good things and bad things, is how he describes it. He says, just as the good things don't take away from the bad things, don't let the bad things remove from the good things. And says that really put things in perspective for me. They're two separate things. They're something you have, but one doesn't negate the other.
Yeah, and you also said there, when you haven't experienced, grief in a really difficult way, it's hard to even experience the opposite emotion of so much joy.
Explaining grief to someone who's never lost someone is like trying to explain the color blue to someone who is blind from birth. They'd have nothing to base it on. There's nothing you can compare it to. I was reading a psychologist article, and she was a psychologist, and she treated people for grief, counseled them with grief and loss. And says, yes, I know I helped people, I definitely helped people and was good at doing it. But until her father passed away, she never truly understood. She realized she thought she knew what they were feeling, but and then she realized she never really truly knew what these people were feeling.
That's so good. And that is why, there are so many coaches out there, and there's so many different niches that they're all involved in. But the one thing you'll find is most likely the coach that's going to help you best is someone who has a similar story to yours. For me, when I was going through and getting out of a domestic abuse situation, I had lots of counseling. It was not until I had somebody who had gone through what I was experiencing and was able to help me with the mindset that I needed, the way I needed to be able to recognize things differently. And that's something that is so unique that, yes, counselors can help you.
Yeah.
But when I had someone going side by side with me who was like, hey, you got this. This is what you're experiencing, like what you're saying with grief. This is normal. Like, this is how you can reframe that. This is, don't give yourself so much shame over what you're feeling if you do have that relief a little bit and those different things. People who haven't gone through that, maybe it's just not intuitive to kind of share that piece.
Right. Yeah, it's a hard thing. You don't think to go get educated on the subject unless it happens to you too. Right. You aren't going to go out and research and read books on grief just because you like to read about grief.
Yeah, it's not on my top 10. I'm feeling really good today. Let me go read about grief. But that when you shared that, it just further brought to my mind that these struggles that we all face, these trials can become testimonies of what can happen when you embrace the hard.
Yeah.
And do your own work, and then find your opportunity to make a difference. And that's what we're here doing today and continuing to do in our advocacy. What else? Is there anything on your mind that you want our listeners to know about how they can navigate grief, or how they can get involved in even AIM or We're on Melanoma?
Definitely AIM at Melanoma. It's an easy term to search. And you can find the organization. The organization, their website is great because there's resources. If you or someone you love is having trouble with melanoma or have a connection with it, you can they can assign mentors. There's an online nurse you can speak to with questions. The same with Start Now for identifying and looking for melanoma. War on Melanoma or Start Seeing Melanoma. Mm-hmm. They'll both take you there. There's There's actually classes on there. There's some accredited classes for medical professionals. There's accredited classes for people who need to keep their license up, like beauticians, tattoo artists, stuff like that. And then there's one for the general public, but it teaches you what to look for, how to spot it, what you should do about it. Basically being aware, and if you see it on someone else, since he would say, if you see something, say something. And I've done that just standing in the grocery store. I'll say, hey, do you notice that? Fact, couple situations in real life happened. One was, and I don't know if you heard the story about she works at OHSU now. She was a student in Washington. And she was going to the hockey game, right? And the hockey player sees this spot on him, can see this spot on him. So she can't get his attention, so she types out, you should see a dermatologist. That spot looks suspicious, and holds it up to the glass. And he went in, and it saved his life. Wow. And then there's a TikTok video. A guy was doing TikTok videos, and one of the people watching it noticed a spot on him on the video, and just messaged him, hey, that looks suspicious, you should go to a dermatologist. The TikTok person came back and said, hey, says he was right, I went, it was melanoma, they caught it early, I'm going to survive because this person saw something and said something. And it happens every day, stories that we never hear of. Ultimately, my whole reason for advocacy is that their story be my story, where, I caught it in situ and it was easy, as opposed to my wife's story. But that's the goal of everyone, is to just, get it before it gets serious. It's almost 100% containable, removable when it's in its earliest stages. Once it's metastasized, it's what's the word? Systemic. Right. And so when it goes into the lymph system, the blood, you have to treat the whole body. It's not something you can just remove it at that point and say it's good. My wife's, it was in the liver for a long. It did move into the hip bone. Her hip started hurting. And so it was on a weekend. She went to the emergency room. Emergency room doctor really didn't know her history very well. Even if he saw the melanoma, wouldn't associated it with hip pain. Yeah. So they were x-raying, looking for what was broken or what was injured. And I called the oncologist, and he came in and says, no, this is because of, this is the melanoma moved to the bone. He says, nice thing about bone is it's hard. We can radiate that. And they were within a few treatments of radiation into the bone, and the pain went away, and it was fine. He says you can't do that to an organ, but we can do that to bone. So at least that alleviated that problem. Yeah. So that was really helpful.
Well, it has been such an honor to be here with you today. I know that this is going to make a difference in someone's lives, and we're connected now and continuing to advocate for the research in melanoma. So thank you for being here. To our listeners, we will have links in our show notes, as well as on my website in the blog section. You can hear more about Robin's story, reading on it, and you can also get to all of these different links and get connected. And if there's something that's not answered, reach out. I'm here to support you. I can get you in contact with Robin if there's something there that you need. But thank you so much for listening and being part of our episode today, and I hope you have a great day. New podcasts every Friday. Listen and subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts. If you're ready to start your own transformation journey, visit meganbabcock.com. This podcast is intended only for educational, inspirational, and entertainment purposes. The purpose of this podcast is not to replace the counsel of a physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or other qualified professional. If you or someone you know is struggling or in crisis, help is available. Call or text 988 or chat 988lifeline.org.